Origin just hopes with UX, and this is shocking Chinese military corruption exposed. What's now task and purpose? We're gonna dunk against China again? Yeah. Obviously, this task and purpose video, he makes this like corruption videos. I don't think I've watched any other one. I'm pretty sure there's a Russia one, right? Is there an India one? Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I definitely have to check out the India one. Like, okay, let's see if like time. This is 20-minute video. If that's 40-minute video, I'm like, yeah, okay, that doesn't look good, does it? So yeah, Chinese corruption. I mean, we already know this, right? Anyone with like a two brain cell already know this. Why? Because communistic country, right? They have to hide things under the rug so they don't look bad. Which is like, okay, well, democracy is kind of like opposite of that, right? Depending who's in power, but usually opposite of that. They basically make things public, right? Because there is no one singular entity which has power, right? So people will make things public, right? There will be opposing parties basically that wants the original party to go away, so everybody keeps everybody in check, right? That makes it kind of slower to work as well, but you know, in the end it's all good, right? Yes, it moves slow, but it's better in the end. It's democracy, right? So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I like task and purpose. I've been watching task and purpose video recently, past few months, and they're all like geopolitics, military related things, which is like really interesting. That's what it.
What a whirlwind of excitement within the People's Liberation Army right now. They've been playing musical chairs with their top brass, firing more than 15 of their top generals within the span of just 6 months. This represents the largest purge in recent history, and it included leadership in their most prized branch, the Rocket Force. These actions have largely been attributed to combating corruption within the PLA. One article in Bloomberg even claimed US intelligence believed corruption was so bad in China that their missiles are literally filled with water instead of fuel. But hold your horses, folks. Before we jump to conclusions, the credibility of that article has been called into question for a few reasons that we'll get into in this video. Either way, this raises important questions about the extent of the corruption issue within the PLA. It's also the perfect opportunity for us to learn about how the ethics and cultural understanding of corruption in China.
Yeah, I don't believe the water thing, because China has resources, China has manpower, right? There's a reason why whenever something is rare, we say like, oh, it's not rare, it's in China, because it is. Way too many elements are in China, right? China is not like deprived of all the raw material. China is not deprived of manpower, right? China can even force manpower needed. So I don't think their missiles are going to be filled with water, right? Russia has issue of like, not having resources, not having enough manpower, economy in general. That's not the case with China. So China's not going to be that. If China says this many rockets I have, they have it. Now, how good the technology is a different question, because they don't have history like USA, like not track record, accumulation of skill, let's just say. Now, firing all these generals, isn't that a problem? Like, you just fired all your experience, like your military is already not experienced, because like when was the China was last in any war? Now you fire the generals, most of you. Like, okay, if conflict happens, who knows what to do now, right? You feel like you think like, oh, come on, anybody who comes to general post probably will know it, but it's not that easy, especially on the battlefield when you're actually like making decisions.
Works very differently than it does here in the West. But first, when I was in boot camp at Fort Benning, my drill sergeant would yell at me and smoke me for having a 5 o'clock shadow. I wish I had Henson shaving back then, because their razor gave me the closest shave I've ever had with zero irritation on my skin.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I've worried for a bit. Usually this kind of like sponsorship is about private areas, and it's like, okay, my commander scream at me, why are you commander talking to you about saving that area? But no, wait a minute, it's not that.
If you're cursed with hairiness like me, you need a close shave so you don't have peach fuzz growing on your face within 3 hours. Born out of an aerospace company in 2020, Henson harnessed their expertise to develop a razor system that supports the blade right up to the edge, eliminating blade chatter, which is a primary source of razor burn. The blade is only exposed about 1/1000th of an inch. That's less than the thickness of a human hair. Instead of using those expensive multi-blade cartridges that are full of plastic and give you razor burn, grab Henson's AL-13, an aircraft aluminum. Its surgically engineered razor takes just one old school razor blade. You remember those? And instead of throwing away $2, $3, $4 on each cartridge, razor blades just cost 10 cents a piece here. I'm no NASA engineer, but that seems cheaper and more efficient to me. And if 10 cents is too expensive for you, Henson is offering 100 free blades with the purchase of a razor. Just use code TASK at checkout. Starting in July 2020.
10 cents is like costlier for blade. I mean, what do I pay? For 3 blades I pay somewhat like about $7, right? So one blade would be like, I don't know, like $2+. I don't know, like 10 cents. How is that costlier?
2023. A sweeping campaign targeted Chinese generals, particularly within the PLA rocket force, in what amounted to a purge. This probably wouldn't have been such a big deal if a couple of infantry generals that we were talking about here, but we're talking about one of the most important parts of the PLA that oversees their tactical and nuclear missiles. This branch has seen some of the biggest increases in funding and modernization in recent years. Its job is considered one of the most important to Chinese military strategy. From their perspective, it helps to deter US warships in the South China Sea. It's hard for me to impress upon you just how key the rocket force really is to China's future plans. The rocket force and its silos are located throughout the entire country, not just one theater command. And we'll see with Great Purge comes great consequences, because the firings have temporarily weakened the PLA, but unlike the Purge in 2015, which was believed to have been aimed at eliminating political opponents, the current Purge here in 2023 is thought to be primarily focused on combating corruption. And what are we inferring this from? Well, partly because on January 6th, Bloomberg published a report stating that anonymous US assessments claimed the missiles of the rocket force were filled with water instead of fuel. Additionally, the report mentioned the presence of malfunctioning missile silos in their lids in Western China, which could potentially hinder effective missile launches. However, from a technical standpoint, it's highly improbable for a missile to be filled with water. It's important to note that only one type of missile in the rocket force inventory, the DF-5, is liquid fueled. Normally, liquid fuel is loaded into the missile shortly before launch, making it unlikely that water would be present inside the missile itself. It is plausible that the water was found in the fuel tank designated for the DF-5 missile, and some officers might have stolen the fuel for illicit purposes. Furthermore, experts on China have since called into question whether this might come down to a mistranslation between English and Chinese. There are phrases or idioms in China whose meaning can easily be mistranslated.
Really, Mandarin is like hard to translate? Yeah, I think we know that.
In this case, there's a theory that the term for watered down, or it might have been an idiom for inflating or padding, which was misinterpreted to mean the missiles were literally filled with water. It's tough to get confirmation since the source of this intelligence was anonymous. If you want to understand just how little we understand about what's happening inside China's politics and military, we need only look at how little they understand about what's happening in the United States. A disinformation campaign in China has many of them convinced that Texas has officially declared a civil war and broken off from the United States. If that ever does happen, it certainly hasn't happened yet. I bring this up to illustrate how, in some cases, what China perceives about US internal institutions is far from the truth, and it's likely the same that for some of our perceptions of Chinese institutions. It turns out, understanding each other's political dramas is about as easy as speed running Cuphead. Evidence comes from the fact that there are multiple different theories about what's happening in China right now, including that the firings might be Xi Jinping trying to put in place new generals who are willing to go to war. US presidents themselves have a history of firing high-profile generals if they don't agree on some key issues. Famously, General MacArthur was fired by Harry Truman. President Obama removed General McChrystal after he spoke ill of him to the media. Officers in the United States are fired at a surprisingly routine frequency. Just a cursory look revealed dozens in the past year alone. However, the US is by no means systematically replacing 15 of their top generals at the same time. Let's make no mistake. But there were additional claims of corruption in the PLA. For example, Radio Free Asia reported that a former PLA officer claimed Chinese Air Force personnel had used fuel to cook and prepare hot pot. I mean, come on, that's rookie levels of corruption. When I was in Iraq, we used JP8 diesel fuel to burn our waste, garbage, and I'm sure I ate a JP8 fuel heated hot dog or two. The China Aerospace University.
Some of these corruption are just like troops being troops. Okay, they use the, I don't know, like rocket fuel to do this shit. I think people do that. Why the fuck not? That's just like shenanigans.
University is a subsidiary of the US Air Force University. They're one of the most credible resources on studying China's military that I've found over there in the past few years. In October 2022, they published a comprehensive Chinese rocket force report spanning 255 pages. The report provided detailed information on the organizational structure of the rocket force, the identities of commanders and senior leaders, as well as sensitive data such as the location and coordinates of specific troop levels and the types of deployed missiles. So Basically, the US military was able to acquire really high-level intelligence, and it suggests that it was potentially a leakage of Chinese military secrets from within the upper echelons of the rocket force. This in turn may have contributed to the decision to investigate the rocket force further. In July 2023, for example, Wu Ganghu, a former deputy commander of the rocket force, passed away. The official obituary attributed the death to cerebral hemorrhage. However, Wu's former superior, Xiao Yang, posted on social media claiming that Wu had chosen to end his time on Earth himself, if you know what I mean. He might have seen the writing on the wall and checked out early instead of having to face the CCP authorities. This revelation generated concerns and speculation about the state of affairs within the rocket force, which needed clarification from the CCP themselves. That same month, the Equipment Development Department of the Central Military Commission made a public announcement seeking information regarding illegal procurement and
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, authoritarian government, it's really hard to process what we're living under that umbrella, right? You feed your government at this level, right? Whole general checks out because he feels like, okay, the power doesn't like what I'm doing and just like might do something about it. And it's not just something low level how it happens like in democracy, like reasonable. Reasonable word doesn't even apply anymore, right? If you go to authoritarian government, you're just like common sense doesn't work. You think like, oh come on, I can't be punished for doing that. No, that's not how it works. It's like you're constantly on the edge of the blade, which is insane. People, I still can't believe it. A higher level general checks out because he was afraid that he have to face the like a communist China police or something, like Xi Jinping's police or something. Okay, why am I being removed? Because we don't agree with certain policy you're doing. So there you go. What is my punishment? Who knows? Like use your imagination.
And bidding of military equipment dating back to October 2017. This marked the initiation of these corruption investigations. 2 days later, reports emerged stating that Rocket Force Commander Li Yaochao, Deputy Commander Gao Bin, and former Deputy Commander Zhen Zhang had been arrested and were currently under investigation. So in July, Xi Jinping announced the appointment of Wang Houbin as the new Rocket Force Commander. He's 63 years old and he's been in the service since 1979. So he's an old hand. Then Xi Shang was made the political commissar. Political commissars are unique to the Chinese military and are basically a high-ranking officer whose primary responsibility is to ensure the ideological loyalty and political reliability of military personnel. Could you imagine if you had a captain walking around quizzing you on how much you love Joe Biden or George Bush throughout your career? Yeah, that's an oversimplification, but that's essentially what a political commissar is. It's not too far off from it anyway. All right, Spare Parts Army, it's time to grab your popcorn, sit back and enjoy the show because it's time to watch China's corruption on full display here. So picture.
So true. What do you think of like a free market and capitalism versus what our great leader Xi Jinping is doing in communism? Just your answer better be right. That's what that is basically, right? Like, are you saying true to communism in general? Because that is the alternative. There can never be alternative. That's insane, man.
Picture this. Wang Houbin previously served as Deputy Commander of the Navy, and Xiu Xing, formerly Deputy Political Commissar of the Southern Theater Command and Political Commissar of the Theater Air Force, were both transferred to the Rocket Force. Simultaneously, Yao Chu and Zhang Bu were dismissed from their positions. The decision to appoint generals from different military branches to lead the Rocket Force signifies a lack of trust in individuals originating solely from the Rocket Force. In October 2023, China removed former Defense Minister Li Shangfu from his position. Li had been absent from public view since August, and reports indicated that he was being investigated for corruption. Li had headed the departments from 2017 to 2022. Why does any of this matter when the bullets start flying? Because corruption hurts unit cohesion. I'm always reminded of that quote from Band of Brothers when Lieutenant Winters is unhappy when he sees Buck Compton gambling on cards with his enlisted troops. He says, "Never put yourself in a position where you can take from these men." This is a truism in the military. In a well-functioning unit, there's a sense of leadership ethics. This quote emphasizes the importance of avoiding situations where you can exploit or take advantage of your subordinates, even if it's just a seemingly harmless activity like gambling. If you feel like your leadership is taking advantage of their position of power to gain money and bribing their way to the top, how much respect for them would you have?
And personally, I'd be less likely to lay down my life or follow an order that a corrupt officer gave me.
Furthermore, on December 27th, the CCP National Committee dismissed Wu Yangxing, the chairman of the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, Liu Xingshang, the chairman of the Norinco Group, and Wang Changpi, the deputy general manager of China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation, as members of the 14th CPCC National Committee. Boom. Clearance revoked.
Do not pass go. Do not collect 200 yuan.
It would kind of be like if we fired the heads of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and a bunch of defense contractors, which, believe it or not, that kind of thing has happened in the United States in the past during the 1970s and 80s when the defense industry in the US faced a number of lawsuits having to do with corruption. Then, in December 9th, individuals were removed who were
I mean, it's different, right? Based on corruption, based on real data, blaming corporation, which, okay, might not be 100% right, but right enough. And you firing this organization is different than, oh, wait a minute, this corruption is based on certain things, it doesn't agree with me. And it's like, okay, should we see it at a level that it is the corruption? Should we just like remove them completely or make them disappear for a few years? That is completely whole another thing, right? So, and then again, like, this communist countries do sometimes like compare themselves to, democratic countries like this. It's like, oh, you did that. How is that any different from me? Without giving context and just like win the argument, let's just say. Winning the argument is very easy nowadays. Try to sell your own people like, oh, how I'm right. And other countries doing the same thing.
Representatives of the National People's Congress from various departments, including the Joint Staff Department of the Central Military Commission. The simultaneous dismissal of these 9 generals from their positions as NPC deputies by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress is an uncommon occurrence. The majority of these dismissed PLA representatives held technical officer roles and were concentrated within the rocket force and the equipment procurement system. This concentration suggests that significant events or issues of great magnitude have taken place within these two systems. Something we have to understand here is that China has a long history of bureaucratic systems where officials held significant power and authority. Throughout history, corruption has been a reoccurring problem with instances of bribery, nepotism, and embezzlement. The legacy of this history and this context has influenced modern perceptions and practices regarding corruption in China. It's even ingrained in their culture to some degree. With the concept of Guangxi, which means personal relationships and networks, play a traditionally important role in Chinese society. Personal connections are often prioritized over meritocracy, merit. That sounds a lot like the Nepo babies we have here in the US. When Deng Xiaoping initiated economic reforms in the late 1970s, the military had already become an...
Okay, first of all, the whole Nepo thing is weird, right? If you have like public position and you use your power to give like advantage to your kids, that's nepotism. If you own something and you give something to your kids, whatever it is, that's not nepotism, right? If anything, like arguing like somebody who owns something doesn't give to their kids is like bordering, I don't know, like socialism / communism, whatever, right? That's what the communism is all about. So the whole argument against nepotism in the modern world I hear about constantly. Even in India, that happens a lot. Some producer's kid gets a lot of like roles and like, why are you giving that? Why are you not giving some? Okay, first of all, it's his company, his money, his production team. He can make a hat out of it if he wants. He's want to make a, like, his own kid a star. It's his thing. He doesn't have government role where public money is involved, right? So the whole nepotism in modern world kind of feels closer to communist socialism, like I said, right? That's what the whole communism was, right? Equal opportunity for everybody, regardless of what, even if it becomes a hellscape. So people really need to understand what is nepotism. I mean, in general, like to the truest of the word, yeah, sure, that applies to nepotism. But how nepotism works, right? It's like saying somebody who owned a multi-billion-dollar company died and gave all his fortune to his kids. Yeah, that's how it works. That's not nepotism.
Integral part of China's economic landscape. In addition to its farms and various industrial activities, the military in China controlled an extensive defense production industrial complex that had some of the nation's best technical capabilities. Even within civilian enterprises, major airports and numerous other sectors fell under military control and administration. China's railways, for instance, had to prioritize the military's orders. Consequently, during the early 1980s, the number of PLA troops reached a peak of about 4.1 million people. There were thousands of registered business firms associated with the military. This bureaucratic system, where it's the government's money, not yours, on the line, is primed for corruption. Moreover, the military enjoyed a favorable position for smuggling activities because neither the police nor customs had the right to inspect military vehicles suspected of carrying illicit goods. According to this research publication titled "The Chinese Military and Its Business Operations," the PLA.
Obviously, when you give this level of authority to the military and like tell everybody like stay away, you have no authority, shit like this is gonna happen, right? Whenever like a smaller countries start to get bigger, there's always a friction between military and like governing bodies because of like detachment like this. So obviously giving this level of power to military, yeah, corruption is kind of high. Nobody can inspect it. Nobody has any power. Of course, there's going to be a problem.
By Thomas J. Bickford, the annual revenue generated by PLA-run businesses in 1997 exceeded $18 billion, with exports alone contributing $7 billion to foreign exchange earnings. We know there's an apparent economic slowdown in China right now. So what that means is these various government agencies involved in business ventures are unlikely to receive sufficient funding. This thereby prompts them to seek loopholes to keep their money. This challenge becomes even bigger due to repeated allegations of involvement by high-ranking leaders. There are accusations of top officials and their relatives engaged in smuggling. It's widely known that coveted positions within the PLA are often controlled by the offspring, the children of influential party leaders. Deng's son-in-law, for instance, exerts influence over major PLA-run business corporations. Every government and military is plagued by misuse of funds. It's not always the best military that wins wars. It's usually the least worst. So the question isn't whether or not there's corruption in the CCP, but just how bad is it? How much of it is by design? How much of it is a feature, not a bug? Despite the implementation of numerous anti-smuggling measures, China's prosecutors had to handle over 100,000 corruption cases in 1998 alone. The PLA failure to effectively address this negative publicity and growing criticism from the party leadership ultimately made it the target of President Zhang's anti-graft campaign. In a surprising move, President Jiang Zemin announced in early 1998 that the army and armed police are hereby ordered to cease all business activities. Initially, many officials and commentators dismissed this announcement, believing it wouldn't be seriously pursued by the party leadership. But in October 1998, in a large meeting attended by the Central Committee, the State Council, and the Central Military Commission was held to address the issue. During their talks, President Zhang's policy directive was finally endorsed. The armed forces and police were urged to fully comply with national policy and adhere to the deadline by December 15, 1998. Plans were also formulated for the takeover of PLA-run businesses. So at one point, Chinese military ran actual businesses. So you can see how ingrained this thinking is in their recent history. And state media reported that this transition was successfully completed within the design time framework. You might be surprised to learn there was an alleged conspiracy plot orchestrated by Zhu Chao and Gao Bangjang to overthrow Xi Jinping through a coup. Zhu Chao held the position of vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, the highest military council in China. As one of the top-ranking officers in the People's Liberation Army, he also served on the 25-member Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party from 2007 to 2012. Meanwhile, his compatriot Gao Bangjang held a position in the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party, the highest decision-making body in China. It's also worth noting that Zhu and Gao, as the highest-ranking military officials in the PLA after the president, held significant influence within the armed forces, which means they could potentially have pulled off a coup. They faced accusations of colluding in a plot against Xi Jinping. Bo was considered Xi Jinping's main political rival prior to Xi ascending as the paramount leader of China. Gao was expelled from the Communist Party in 2015, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment for bribery. Zhu was undergoing legal proceedings and facing a court-martial, but they dropped the charges against him following his death from bladder cancer. Everyone keeps dying before we have a chance to throw them in prison. There's widespread belief that Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign was used as a pretext to eliminate political opponents. Now, that's not what's happening here with the Rocket Force, but it could be something different. He's not afraid the Rocket Force is going to coup him, but maybe he's worried that those in charge of the Rocket Force aren't ready to go to war. Multiple multiple reports from Chinese and international media revealed that the practice of exchanging cash for ranks was widespread within the PLA. This practice allegedly extended from high-ranking officers to lower-ranking petty officers. We don't have this system of exchanging cash for rank in the US military. We reserve that for getting our kids into college. One notable example involved an officer attempting to bribe Zhu.
Yeah, see the Stalin face of like afraid of everybody doesn't come when you have decent power, which China has, right? China is like growing in power. Whatever reports might be telling you like, oh, China's stagnating. Not really. Stagnating in their own height that they were like keep increasing, right? They're getting more powerful really fast. Maybe that might be slowly slowing down or even stagnating, but they're still like immensely powerful. They still have a lot of like resources and things. So right now it's not about like, oh, am I under threat? His command structure, Xi Jinping command structure is like stable enough. He's not afraid of that. He's afraid like if we attack Taiwan, it better not be Russia, Ukraine version 2, right? Like because that would be like a big image stain for China. If China goes to war against Taiwan, gets their ass kicked completely, nobody's gonna ever be fear of like China. So like they are like really making sure like they're properly ready and any corruption goes away.
With 10 million yuan for a higher rank, only to be surpassed by another officer who offered 20 million, leading Zhu to nullify the arrangement with the first officer. Sorry, you didn't pay enough for that rank. There's a lot of justified criticism out there about the US military, but from what I saw, it was not this kind of corruption inside the ranks, and personally I believe my leadership was there thanks to merit that they'd earned. On June 30th, 2014, Zhu was expelled from the Chinese Communist Party. State media described his crimes as an abuse of power. Zhu's downfall came as a surprise, because corruption investigations involving mid-tier military officers are rarely publicly disclosed in order to safeguard national security. The announcement of a high-ranking general's involvement was unprecedented. Zhu became the most senior officer in the history of the People's Liberation Army to be investigated for corruption. This would be like if the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the US military was sent to prison for corruption. It would be earth-shattering news here. In October 2014, Zhu reportedly confessed to accepting bribes, becoming a prominent figure in Xi Jinping's anti-corruption drive. In addition to its impact on the Chinese military's capabilities and bolstering Xi's control over arms trade, the sudden removal of top military commanders could have adverse effect on morale within the Chinese military and present unforeseen challenges to Xi Jinping's authority over the armed forces. Given the Chinese military's limited experience in actual combat and its relatively constrained joint warfare capabilities, the escalating internal turbulence may pose heightened risks to the overall functioning of the Chinese military. While it is conceivable that fuel may have been used for cooking and that silo lids could malfunction, it's essential to approach these claims with caution and skepticism, a healthy dose of it.
The reason it's important to be critical and thoroughly investigate the veracity of these claims
beforehand and before drawing definitive conclusions is because we might make the wrong policy if we assume that China is just a paper tiger. If you want to dive deeper into this, I strongly recommend checking out Perun's outstanding video on Chinese corruption and the channel Sandbox. They also did a great job covering this topic. Links in the description. The PLA rocket force represents a threat to the United States, particularly due to its possession of advanced weapons as well as anti-ship ballistic missiles, which form the backbone of China's anti-access area denial strategy. While the recent scandals may raise questions about the People's Liberation Army rocket force true capabilities, it's crucial for us to never underestimate our adversary. We should remain vigilant despite any perceived weaknesses that may emerge from these scandals.
Hey Spare Parts Army, if you made it this far in the video, I figured you might be interested in some of the new merch that we just dropped. We have a shirt to help you pronounce the word.
Yeah, well, go to original video page link and from there support this channel. It's a really great channel, Task and Purpose. I've been finding out like he covers things really quickly enough, I guess. So more than like pieces of like long-term thing. But whenever something new happens, it's like in a week he makes a video and it's like a really detailed video, which is great, right? I'm guessing he has a big team. Otherwise, if he alone does that, which is insane, like how the fuck? Okay. So yeah, shocking Chinese military corruptions. I mean, it's not really shocking when you see like how the military is structured. What's shocking is like they're actually clamping down. They're actually trying to remove it, which is like, okay, which might be concerning to anybody who's like a China's threat to them, like, you know, like I don't know, US, Western countries, even India. Like, okay, this can only lead to them getting stronger. So I don't know what I think about that. But yeah, this was bound to happen, right? And I don't know how much corruption is gonna go away when your like whole ideology is like that. So there is going to be some form of corruption, but I don't know. This could be, I know what he said, like this corruption is mostly based on readiness of the war and things like that, not really political, but it could be both, right? Nobody really looks at things that detail unless like something comes to their throat or something, right? Come for their throat. So I think there would have been some kind of threat to Xi Jinping or something, otherwise he would not directly climb down like this, but I don't know. But yeah. Alright, well, it was shocking Chinese military corruption exposed by the channel Task and Purpose. If you like my reaction, do follow and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.